I wanted to start with the basics. So we're gonna learn the violin parts, the parts of the violin. So if you can see me up here, the top of your screen, I'm gonna be showing you as I go along with my image. So the first thing is where we rest our chin when we play. So you see like this. Can you guess what that's called? I'll give you a hint. It has chin in the name. We call it our chin rest. So the next part is this thing right here, this wooden thin thing that holds up our 4 strings. And we call that the bridge. And you can remember that because kind of forms a bridge for the strings. So I can see you right through it. The next part are these guys right here. These help us tighten our strings to make the pitch higher, or we can loosen them to make the strings lower. They keep us in tune, and they're called our tuning pegs. And then here, we have this really cool thing. If you touch it on your violin, it's really smooth on the back. And I like how it makes this swirly whirly in here. And we call that a scroll. Next, this is one of the most important parts on the violin, this black thing right here. And that is where we put our fingers when we play. That we call the fingerboard. So that's kind of easy to remember, right? Next, where we hold our violin when we play, that's called, just like you and me, our violin has a belly, the belly of our violin. And next, these little guys here, we have 2 of them on either side of the bridge. And if you look closely, they look like a cursive F. You can see that with a little line in the middle there. Those we call the F hole. And the F stands for forte, which in Italian, maybe you know, it means loud. And the reason they're called forte holes is because that is where the sound of our violin comes out so we can be heard when we play. Next are these guys right here. And they do something similar to our pegs up here. So they help keep us in tune, and they work like little screws that we tighten and loosen. And we call those our fine tuners. And they're called fine tuners because they're meant for when the pitch is just a little off. If it only needs to go up a little bit or down a little bit. Our tuning pegs are for if it's really out of tune, which sometimes happens if it's really hot and the wood changes and then the pegs get really tight and so the sound goes bad. Or if it's really cold, the wood shrinks up and maybe our pegs will slip and the pitch will get really low. But on normal days, we can just use our fine tuners to keep us sounding good. And the last bit, I want you guys to try to think of the name here. We have this guy. Now, think of your violin as an animal. What else on an animal comes out the end and is long and thin behind the animal? It's your tail. So your tailpiece right here. So those are all the parts of the body of the violin, right? We have our chin rest. We have our bridge that holds up the strings. We have our tuning pegs to help us make the sound the right pitch. We have our scroll. We have the black fingerboard. We have the belly of the instrument. We have the F holes where the sound comes out. We have our fine tuners, and we have our tailpiece. So what's left? Now we have our bow. All right, so the bow is what we use to make sound on the violin. So the first thing I want us to look at is this point over here, which we call the tip of our bow. The next part is this white thing down here. That's what we put onto the strings. And that comes from a specific animal. So what animal has really long white hair? It's not a polar bear, but it is a horse. So this is actually the hair of a horse. This is called the hair of our bow. And the last bit is this right down here where we hold our bow. And that's named after an animal. It has an eye like one too. This is called the frog, okay? So in our bow, we have the tip of the bow and the frog of the bow, and we have the hair of our bow.